with Star Wars, like how did you get this job to do these books? I mean, I imagine they must have taken a long time. You sat down with George to have these interviews, or how did everything work?
Well, it starts off with a contract, like most of these things.
Right.
Taschen had a contract with Disney, and they added onto it a clause to do 2 books with Lucasfilm. And so, because I've done so many books with film books with Taschen,
Yeah.
quite a few of them are over there. Um, I was asked to basically to go lead on it and to do Star Wars. We had actually talked about doing Star Wars books before. Often at Taschen, a lot of ideas go around, and you want to go forward with the right book at the right time. And so I got this contract. I went to meet with people at Lucasfilm and Disney.
Mhm.
And then it was a matter of getting everybody. Everybody's very busy,
Yeah.
me included, and so we then arranged for me to start research. So really, it was a matter of once I started research, the book could begin. The first idea was actually to do one book with all 6 movies in it.
Oh
Yeah,
wow. Yeah.
and so I went along and I was researching episodes 1 to 6 as we were going through. Um, this is 2015, and really it took four plus years to do both books. Where it started off as one book with no involvement from George. It was just Lucasfilm, Disney. Um, then I got onto the ranch pretty quickly, and I met Leah and the people at at the archives, and it was, I was allowed into the archives, on the ranch, and it was fantastic. I had complete access, all doors opened,
Wow.
roam where you want, make sure you wear the gloves so that you don't destroy anything.
Yeah.
And it was just, and that was it. He says, right, there are all the storyboards, there's all the original art.
Yeah.
At the Presidio, there's all the photography, and they would bring it all to me box by box, all the original negs, all the original proofs, into another archive at the ranch. There's all the production documents, because you have to know for all the negs, the original negs, you have to know um, the lens, focal lengths, when it was taken, what type of film was used, etc., etc., on every piece of film. And
Right.
all this was collected, together. And then at one point, so there's another archive with all the clippings, which is the research library at the main house,
Mhm.
and um, and they also hold George's all George's archives as well, because George has his own separate
Oh,
archive.
interesting. Okay.
So so I'm there, you know, for months. I'm coming back and forth, but ultimately I've been there for a few months,
Mm.
and everybody's, gets to know me, who I am, both there and at the Presidio. I'm asking questions. Now the thing is that I am very frightened at this point, right? Because when you dive into an archive, right, it's complete freedom. You can do what you like, you in this case, but you can think anything you want to think.
Mhm.
It's a complete blank slate. I have no preconceived ideas about what I was going to find, and to a certain extent, uh, because there are books about the archives, you can only include what's in the archives.
Right.
So you have to. It's a bit like the horse whisperer. You have to let the archives talk to you. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
and you have to see what's in there and what the story is by what's being given to you, by what's being you're pulling out, and what connections I'm making in my brain as I'm going through it.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's at a certain point I'm talking about it, and I'm realizing, well, there have been lots of absolutely fantastic books done on Star Wars, not least by J.W. Rinsler. The thing is that when I started making books, I look to other books and I think, oh God, those are great books.
Yeah.
And could I ever, make a book as good as that? Right? Because that's always the fear when you're going into these archives, especially on Star Wars. And so I had to think, well, Jay Rinsler has done everything. What could I do? What can I contribute? What can I do that's different and going to be interesting and add to the collective knowledge? Yeah, and that's the same when I was doing the Charlie Chaplin archives and the James Bond archives and Ingmar Bergman archives and all the other books that we've done. Then about 6 months, 7 months, 8 months into it, I realized that, well, really what I'm interested in as I'm, reading all the documents and reading interviews and stuff is really I'm interested, what did George think? Because ultimately, right, it's his baby, right? And I thought, well, really, if I could have the book from George's point of view as he's making it, and I can understand the decisions and his thought processes as he's making Star Wars, as he's writing it, directing, editing, etc. Really, that's what I'm interested in. More than anything else, that was the thing I was interested in. And so I said, well, could I get access? Could I possibly get access to George's materials? And so, question was passed on, and the answer came back and says, yeah, you can look at what he has in his archives. Because obviously different producers and different people kept different things.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I said, great, thank you very much. And then a few months later, I sort of got cheeky and I said, well, I have to explain that when films are being made, right, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of paper trails involved. So when you're doing special effects, you will have special effects, they were called at that time, they're now called VFX, but it was all lumped together. But when they were doing all the optical printing stuff and making mattes and putting each of the images together in order to make one single image, these things were being redone over and over again. And I could see copies in different places, but not the originals. The original documents that says what was filmed on which day. And then George had that file, which was great. But then there was also a file that says, well, George says no to that version, that redo it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, why is George asking that? And then on other documents, normally you will have on each film, and this is consistent throughout in modern filmmaking, there will be making ofs, and it was great on the first movie because Charles Lippincott had interviewed extensively virtually everybody involved in the production multiple times, including George. George, while he's writing it in different conferences, etc., with Gary Kurtz, with other people, etc. So he was actually taking note of what George was thinking at different parts of the filmmaking process. And I thought, this is great. I've got to include as much of this as possible.
Right.
But not everything's in there, right? So then I thought, well, let's ask George, see if he'll be part of the project.
Right.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And luckily he said yes.
Nice.
And
Cool.
so I got to what day do you want? A day. Ooh, yes. Okay. So I arranged for another meeting at research trip and I had a day with George, and I arranged it at the beginning of my research trip.